Welcome to Champion University. My name is Kevin with Champion Tire, and before we talk about skills, scripts, or performance, we have to talk about identity. Because the single biggest problem in the automotive industry today is not sales, not pricing, and not even technology. It's role confusion. Service advisors across this industry are exhausted, stressed, and burned out, not because they aren't capable, but because they were never clearly taught what their job actually is. They were handed responsibility without structure, pressure without clarity, and expectations without a framework. If you're watching this and you've ever felt like you're doing everything you can and still falling behind, I want you to understand something very clearly. That feeling is not a personal failure. It is a structural failure. You were placed inside a system that was never properly defined, and then you were expected to thrive inside it. Most service advisors did not choose this role because they dreamed of it. They were needed. They were dependable. They showed competence, and suddenly they were answering phones, writing estimates, managing technicians, explaining complex repairs, calming upset customers, watching the clock, watching the numbers, and holding the entire operation together. Nobody sat them down and explained how all of those responsibilities fit together. Nobody explained which parts mattered most, which parts supported the rest, and which parts were distractions. So advisors learned the job the only way they could, by just surviving. Survival mode becomes dangerous when it becomes permanent. When everything feels urgent, nothing feels important. When every conversation feels like pressure, communication stops being clear. And when clarity disappears, trust erodes between the advisor and the customer, between the front and the back of the shop, and eventually between the advisor and the job itself. This is why the automotive industry does not have a sales problem. It has a clarity problem. Customers don't resist because they're cheap. Technicians don't get frustrated because they don't care. Advisors don't burn out because they're weak. All of those outcomes come from one root cause. Nobody slowed down long enough to define the role properly. Champion University exists to fix that. Not with hype. Not with pressure-based sales training. Not with scripts designed to corner customers, but with clarity. Because clarity is the foundation of confidence, confidence is the foundation of trust, and trust is the foundation of every great shop that lasts longer than a few good years. If what I'm saying resonates with you, it doesn't mean you're behind. It means you're finally seeing the job for what it actually is, and that's where real growth starts.
Let me talk from the technician side for a minute, because this part almost never gets said out loud. Most technicians are not trying to sell anything. We're not sitting in the shop thinking about how to squeeze more money out of customers. What we're thinking about is whether a vehicle is safe, whether it's going to break down, and whether we're going to see it again for the same problem. When we inspect a vehicle, we're looking at wear patterns, failure points, and things that are going to cause problems if they're ignored. That's not theory to us. We've seen the consequences. We've seen brakes metal to metal. We've seen tires blow out. We've seen cars come back on a hook because something small was put off too long. The frustrating part isn't when a customer says no. The frustrating part is when the intent behind our recommendations never makes it to the customer in the first place. When something important gets shortened, softened, or rushed, it changes how the customer hears it. From our side, it can feel like the work is being questioned, or like we're being made to look like we're overreacting. And over time, that creates a disconnect between the front and the back of the shop. Not because anyone has bad intentions, but because the message keeps getting distorted. Most technicians don't expect advisors to know everything we know. That's not the job. What we expect is respect for the inspection and respect for the process. When a technician takes the time to document a concern, take photos, record a video, and explain what they're seeing, that information deserves to be presented clearly and honestly. When it is, something powerful happens. Customers stop arguing about whether a repair is real. They start asking better questions. They start understanding the difference between urgent and preventative, and the conversation shifts from conflict to cooperation. When that doesn't happen, techs feel like they're constantly defending themselves. Advisors feel like they're stuck in the middle. Customers feel like they're being pushed. And everyone walks away frustrated. The truth is, technicians and service advisors are on the same team, whether it feels like it or not. We both want the same thing: safe vehicles, honest recommendations, and customers who trust the shop enough to come back. A strong service advisor doesn't sell our work. They translate it. They take what we see in the shop and help the customer understand why it matters in the real world. When that happens, techs feel respected, customers feel informed, and the shop runs the way it's supposed to. That's why this role matters so much. The advisor is the bridge. And when that bridge is built the right way, everything on both sides gets stronger.
This is where the service advisor's role becomes clearer than most people ever explain it. You are standing at the center of three different perspectives at all times. The technician, the customer, and the business itself. Each one has real needs. Each one has real pressures. And none of them are wrong. The technician needs their work understood and respected. They need to know that the time they put into inspecting, documenting, and explaining a vehicle actually matters. The owner needs the shop to operate efficiently, ethically, and profitably so the doors stay open and the team stays employed. And the customer needs to feel safe, informed, and confident in the decisions they're making. The service advisor's job is not to choose one of those sides. It's to hold all three at the same time without letting any of them get ignored. That takes skill, it takes awareness, and it takes a clear understanding of the role. When advisors don't have that clarity, the job feels like constant conflict. When they do, the job starts to feel like leadership. Because you're not reacting to pressure anymore, you're guiding conversations in a way that serves everyone involved. In the next part of this video, we're going to slow things down and look at the situation from the customer's point of view. Because understanding how customers think, what they're worried about, and what they're not saying out loud is one of the most important skills a service advisor can develop.
Let me explain what this feels like from the customer side, because most customers never know how to say this out loud. When I bring my car into a repair shop, I already feel uneasy. Cars are expensive, repairs are expensive, and most of us don't really understand what's happening under the hood. That alone puts me in a vulnerable position before the conversation even passed. I'm trying to listen, but I'm also carrying fear with me. Fear of being taken advantage of. Fear of making the wrong decision. Fear of agreeing to something I don't fully understand and regretting it later. Even if I don't say it, that fear is always there. When explanations feel rushed, overly technical, or incomplete, it doesn't make me feel confident. It makes me feel small. It makes me feel like I'm supposed to either blindly trust what I'm being told or say no just to protect myself. Most customers aren't trying to be difficult. We're trying to feel safe. And safety doesn't come from urgency alone. It comes from understanding. When I don't understand what's being explained, my instinct is to shut down emotionally, even if I'm nodding my head on the outside. A lot of times when customers push back or hesitate, it's not because we don't care about our car. It's because we don't know how serious something really is. If everything sounds urgent, nothing feels urgent. And if everything feels optional, I default to doing nothing. What most customers need, but don't know how to ask for, is someone to slow down and help connect the dots. I need help understanding what's happening now, what could happen later, and why any of it matters to my real life. I don't always know how to ask those questions, especially when I feel intimidated or rushed. When a service advisor takes the time to explain things clearly and calmly, something changes. I stop feeling defensive. I stop feeling like I have to protect myself. I start feeling like I'm being respected and included instead of talked at.
Now that you understand what the technician is trying to do and what the customer is actually feeling, we can finally talk about what the service advisor's role really looks like when it's done correctly. This is where most advisors feel stuck. You're standing in the middle of competing pressures. The technician needs their work respected and communicated accurately. The customer needs to feel safe, informed, and not rushed. And the business needs to operate efficiently and profitably to survive. The mistake most advisors make is thinking they have to choose which side to serve. They feel like supporting the technician means upsetting the customer, or helping the customer means hurting the business. That belief is what creates stress, conflict, and burnout. The truth is, the service advisor's job is not to pick sides, it's to create alignment. When you understand each perspective clearly, you stop reacting emotionally and start leading conversations intentionally. You don't rush because you're nervous. You don't avoid explanations because you're afraid of objections. You don't feel like you're constantly defending yourself or the shop. Clarity gives you control. When you know why a technician is recommending something, you can explain it with confidence instead of hesitation. When you understand what the customer is worried about, you can address real concerns instead of guessing. And when you understand the needs of the business, you can guide conversations in a way that's honest and sustainable. This is what leadership looks like in the service advisor role. It's not authority. It's not pressure. It's not talking louder or faster. It's the ability to slow things down, frame the situation clearly, and help everyone involved move forward with confidence. When advisors lead this way, conversations change. Customers stop feeling defensive. Technicians stop feeling ignored. Advisors stop feeling trapped. The shop starts to feel calmer, more organized, and more professional, not because the work changed, but because the communication did. This is the shift Champion University is built around. We don't train advisors to push harder. We train them to think clearer, because when clarity improves, pressure disappears. And when pressure disappears, performance follows naturally.
I've been around this industry long enough to watch the same patterns repeat themselves. Every few years, there's a new system, a new sales method, a new way to fix the front counter. Some of them work for a while, some of them don't. But most of them miss the same thing. They focus on short-term results instead of long-term trust. I've seen shops that were busy every day but hollow on the inside. Advisors stressed out. Technicians frustrated. Customers coming once and never coming back. On paper, things looked fine. In reality, everything felt fragile. And I've seen other shops, quieter shops, where people came back year after year. Not because they were the cheapest, not because they were the fastest, but because people trusted them. Trust isn't built by saying the right words. It's built by explaining the truth consistently, even when it takes more time. It's built when customers feel like someone is actually looking out for them instead of just moving them along. The advisors who last in this industry aren't the ones who talk the fastest or close the hardest. They're the ones who understand that every conversation is an investment. Not just in today's repair, but in the relationship. When advisors slow down enough to explain things properly, something interesting happens. Customers stop bracing themselves. They stop assuming the worst. They start listening instead of defending. That kind of trust doesn't just help the customer. It protects the technician's work. It protects the advisor's energy. And it protects the business from burning through people and starting over every few years. I've watched too many good advisors leave this industry not because they weren't talented, but because they were tired of fighting the same battles every day. They were tired of being caught between pressure and misunderstanding with no framework to rely on. The truth is, this job can be sustainable. It can be meaningful. And it can be something you're proud of, but only if it's built on clarity and integrity instead of urgency and pressure. Shops that last don't rush people. They educate them. They don't hide behind complexity. They translate it. And they don't treat trust like a tactic. They treat it like a responsibility. If this industry is going to get better, it won't be because of louder voices or harder closes. It will be because more advisors learn how to slow down, explain the truth, and lead conversations the right way. That's what endures, and that's what's worth building.
Now that you understand the role, the pressure, and the different perspectives involved, it's important to be clear about what Tier 1 is actually designed to build. Tier 1 is not about turning you into a salesperson. It's not about scripts, gimmicks, or shortcuts. And it's not about chasing numbers without understanding where they come from. Tier 1 is about foundation. Before you can communicate well, you have to think clearly. Before you can guide customers confidently, you have to understand your role deeply. And before you can perform consistently, you need a framework that makes sense under pressure. Most advisors are taught what to say before they're taught how to think. That's backwards. When you don't understand why something matters, every conversation feels harder than it should. You hesitate. You rush. You second-guess yourself. Tier 1 focuses on mindset, language, and structure. We teach you how to see situations clearly, how to organize information in a way customers can understand, and how to communicate without sounding defensive or rehearsed. This level is about learning how to slow things down without losing control of the day. It's about understanding urgency versus importance. It's about knowing how to explain recommendations in a way that respects the technician's work, the customer's situation, and the reality of the business. When advisors have this foundation, something important happens. Conversations become calmer. Objections become questions instead of arguments. And decisions stop feeling like battles that have to be won. Tier 1 also teaches consistency. Not every day is smooth. Not every customer is easy. But when you have a framework, you're not reinventing the wheel with every conversation. You're operating from principles instead of panic. This is what makes the job sustainable. You're no longer reacting to pressure. You're responding with intention. And that shift alone changes how the job feels at the end of the day. Tier 1 doesn't promise perfection. What it promises is clarity. And clarity is what allows you to grow, improve, and eventually master this role instead of feeling trapped by it. Everything that comes later in Champion University builds on this foundation. But without this level, nothing else works the way it should. That's why we start here. If you've made it this far in this video, I want you to pause for a moment and reflect on something. Not on what you've learned, but on how this feels compared to the way you were originally taught this job. Most service advisors are trained to react to phones ringing, react to upset customers, react to technicians waiting on answers, react to numbers that don't look right at the end of the day. Champion University was built for people who want more than that. This program is for advisors who want clarity instead of chaos, confidence instead of pressure, and a role that feels intentional instead of exhausting. Tier 1 is where that shift begins, not by telling you what to say, but by teaching you how to think, by giving you a framework that holds up when the day gets busy and the conversations get hard. This chapter is free because this mindset should never be hidden. But the rest of Tier 1 goes deeper. It breaks down how clarity shows up in real conversations, real inspections, and real customer interactions. It teaches you how to stay grounded, consistent, and professional, even when things don't go perfectly. Champion University isn't about turning advisors into closers. It's about turning advisors into leaders, leaders of conversations, leaders of trust.
And leaders inside their shops.
If you're tired of feeling like the job is happening to you instead of being something you're in control of, this program was built for you. If you believe this industry can be better, more honest, more professional, more human, then you're exactly who we designed this for. Tier 1 is the foundation. Everything else builds on it. This is where you stop surviving the role and start mastering it. Welcome to Champion University. The standard doesn't rise on its own. It's raised by people who choose to lead in a different way.